I never thought my marriage would wobble over a question asked in a calm voice on a Tuesday evening. We'd just finished dinner. The dishwasher hummed, the dog snored under the table, and the neighborhood sprinklers clicked like a sleepy metronome outside. Nora pushed her plate away, fingers tracing the rim like she was sketching a map, and said it the way you'd ask for the salt. "I want one night with someone else." "Not a stranger," she added, like that made it better. "A colleague. Tall. Kind. His name is Theo." She said we'd work out rules, boundaries, a mature approach, and that modern couples did this all the time. I laughed because the air felt thin. She didn't. Her face stayed steady, eyes clear like she'd rehearsed in the mirror. She told me Theo confided in her that he was going through a rough patch, that they clicked, that nothing had happened yet, and that transparency was better than secrets. The word transparency turned the room into glass. I could see straight through the walls to the dark yard, the grill cover flapping, the swing set swaying with no kid on it. 14 years together, 10 married, one lovely daughter at camp for the week, and my wife was requesting a night off from us like she wanted to try a new restaurant. I asked her to repeat it, not because I didn't hear, but because I needed time. She said it again with the same careful tone. She loved me. She loved our life. She wanted to explore a feeling and come back. She would never ask for anything more. She called it an experience. I asked if I didn't count as an experience. She said I counted as home. I set my glass down and asked practical things. Where would this happen? A hotel near her office. When? Saturday. How did she picture the morning after? Brunch, errands, maybe a long walk. The casual way she laid out our weekend plan made my chest tighten. She added a speech about autonomy, about curiosity, about how one night could clarify everything. I listened, and I watched her hands. They were steady. Mine were not. Nora has always been bright, sharp, funny in quiet ways. We met in a campus bookstore when she corrected my pronunciation of a poet's name without making me feel small. She wore a jean jacket with 3 pins on the pocket and a pencil in her hair. Years later, she still keeps a pencil behind her ear when she cooks, which I always found endearing and totally impractical. She's the last person I imagined stepping into a conversation like this. Then again, people surprise you. I told her I needed a walk. I slipped on sneakers and stepped into the porch light. Our street glows warm after sunset. Neighbors wave. Tonight I stuck my hands in my pockets and circled the block twice, trying to untangle feelings without naming them. I wasn't furious, not exactly. I wasn't jealous either, at least not immediately. It felt more like I was a kid watching a magician push a silk scarf through a ring, and I knew there was a trick but couldn't see it. Part of me wondered if this was a test. Another part wondered if she'd already crossed lines and was dressing it up as a forward-thinking talk. Suspicion and respect wrestled in my head. Respect kept losing. I reached the park and sat at a metal picnic table cool from the evening air. I thought about our daughter, about her goofy knock-knock jokes, about how she asked me to tie her shoelaces in a double bow for extra speed. I pictured her face if she ever learned her parents treated promises like weekend hobbies. I pictured my mother giving me that silent look that says everything without a word. I pictured Theo, the tall coworker. I'd met him once at a holiday party. He wore a sweater that fit like it was made for him and laughed too easily, like he'd practiced that too. On the third lap home, I knew 2 things. First, I would not argue with someone who'd built a case while I built a birdhouse. Second, I would not beg. Pleading would turn me into a version of myself I wouldn't respect. If you have to, talk someone into loving you. The sale never closes. When I stepped back inside, Nora sat on the couch, legs tucked under, watching our dog twitch in a dream. She looked up. Her eyes were hopeful and a little nervous, like a student waiting for a grade. She started to speak, but I held up a hand and asked for the plain truth. Was this an ongoing thing? No. Had they kissed? No. Did she want a separate life? No. Did she want permission so she wouldn't have to feel guilty? She flinched, then nodded, barely. Something in me settled right then. The room stopped spinning. If guilt was the obstacle, I could remove it. I told her she should go. Her head tilted, not understanding. I repeated the words, Simple and even. If this is what you want, go. She searched my face like there was a trap hidden behind my eyes. There wasn't. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a door. I said she was free to follow through, and I was free to respond in a way that preserved my dignity. She asked what that meant. I told her I wouldn't be waiting with flowers and a warm waffle the next morning. If she chose that path, there would be a consequence she could see, not because I wanted to punish, but because actions make shapes in real life. She said I was being dramatic. I said I was drawing boundaries. She said lots of couples do this. I asked her to name one couple we actually know who made it through that kind of experiment unscathed. She couldn't. We didn't sleep much. I took the guest room. At midnight, the house felt like a museum. Every framed photo was a plaque. First apartment on 8th Street. Road trip to Zion. Our daughter in a cardboard crown. Our dog as a puppy chewing a sandal I secretly didn't like anyway. The museum of our life stared back, and I wondered how many exhibits could be ripped off the wall before the story fractured. In the morning, Nora brewed coffee and tried for normal. We talked about the leaky faucet, about groceries, about the new math app the school sent. The words felt like tokens placed on a board. Before she left for work, she stood in the doorway and said she hoped I'd meet her halfway. I reminded her she moved the goalpost without asking if the field was available. She closed the door with care. At lunch, I drove to her office, not to spy, but to see the hotel she'd name-dropped. It sat across the street with a tasteful sign and potted plants that looked too healthy to be real. The lobby had those chairs that squeak when you sit, but in a fancy way that whispers, "You're safe, we're clean. Everything here costs more than it looks." I stood on the sidewalk and watched a couple check in and wondered if they were starting something or ending something. Maybe both. I called my friend Marcus, a sensible man who fixes appliances and gives me straight talk. I laid out the conversation. He whistled and let out a low, "man." Then he said the thing I needed, which wasn't advice but permission. "You don't have to control her," he said. "You do have to control what you accept. Decide who you are before Saturday, not after." That line stuck like a pushpin in my thoughts. That night, Nora came home with takeout from our favorite place and 2 small cakes from the bakery that still writes cursive icing like it's an art. She said we should eat, we should laugh, we should not turn one decision into a storm cloud that parks over everything. I told her a storm cloud doesn't need my permission to reign. She asked if we could talk to a counselor. I said we could, just not before Saturday. She blinked hard. The clock ticked. On Friday, she packed a small overnight bag, then set it back on the bed, then took it down again, guilt pinballing in her eyes. She told me she might cancel. I told her I wasn't asking for cancellations or promises. Every adult makes choices. The house felt like the inside of a held breath. Our daughter called from camp to tell us about a canoe race and a counselor who could play 3 instruments. We told her we loved her and were proud. After we hung up, Nora stared at the phone like it was a lighthouse we could row toward if we remembered where we left the boat. Saturday morning came with bright sunshine and a bird song that sounded cheerier than necessary. Nora wore a simple dress, the blue one I always liked, and a cardigan even though the day would be hot. She didn't put on much makeup, she didn't need it, and she knew I preferred her face the way it is. Her hands shook when she poured coffee. She asked if I had anything to say before she left. I did. I said she should go. The words came with no tremor. I said she'd asked for a night, and I'd agreed to release her from the story we wrote together so she could write a page of her own. I said I loved her enough to let her test a feeling and discover if it meant what she thought. I also said, love without respect becomes a costume you wear until the party ends. She held the mug so tight her knuckles paled. She asked what would be waiting when she returned. I told her she would see clearly where we stood. She stepped forward as if to hug me, then stopped. I moved aside. The dog thumped his tail, confused by the stillness. She set the mug down, picked up the small bag, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she turned, eyes glossy, searching for a signal that would absolve her. I offered none. She left. The house exhaled. I stared at the quiet living room, the framed photos, the couch with an indent shaped like our evenings. I thought about anger and decided not to feed it. Instead, I made a list. Not of punishments, but of principles. I wouldn't speak poorly about her to our daughter now or later, I wouldn't break anything. I wouldn't contact Theo, because I refused to share a stage with someone who didn't earn it. I would, however, make the reality of her choice visible when she walked back through that door. Love lives in actions, not talk. I cleaned every room with a care bordering on meditative. I sorted drawers we hadn't touched in years. I folded blankets, vacuumed vents, washed baseboards, something I never thought I'd do on a weekend. The rhythm steadied me. Late afternoon, I pulled 3 large trash bags from the pantry. I stood in the bedroom and looked at the dresser covered in little things. Bracelets, sunscreen sticks, a ticket stub from a movie we loved, the hospital bracelet from our daughter's birthday that Nora never tucked away. I slowed down and picked that bracelet up gently and placed it in a small box, along with our wedding album and a handful of letters we wrote when rent was a shared adventure. I set the box aside, safe. Then I looked at the rest. I took a breath, tied the first bag open, and began. When the front door closed behind her, the silence was sharp enough to slice through thought. I stood in it for a while, breathing, hearing the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock. Each sound felt like a heartbeat in an empty room. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the same way. I was resolved. That's a colder, calmer thing. It burns slower, but lasts longer. I moved through the house, picking up her things one by one, her perfume bottle on the dresser, the scarf she always left draped over the dining chair, the yoga mat that had been rolled up for weeks. None of it felt like evidence, just remnants of someone who used to live here fully. Every item carried a story: holidays, laughter, little arguments that ended with both of us apologizing at the same time. I paused often, not out of sadness, but out of respect for what once was. Then I packed. 3 bags, clothes, shoes, the knickknacks that meant something to her but nothing to the house anymore. It wasn't vindictive, it was symbolic. I needed the space to match the truth. I left out the box I'd made, the wedding photos, letters, and the hospital bracelet. That box wasn't about punishment. It was about memory. You don't burn a book because you don't like the ending. By evening, the house looked unfamiliar, lighter, clean, but hollow. I ordered pizza, ate 2 slices, and watched a comedy special I barely heard. Around 10, I turned off the lights, sat on the porch, and stared at the streetlights glowing like distant campfires. My phone buzzed once, a message from Nora. "I'm at the hotel. I hope you're okay." I stared at it, typed nothing, and turned the phone face down. I didn't need to witness her version of closure. The next morning, I woke early. No dreams, just a steady pulse of clarity. I brewed coffee, opened windows, and let the breeze move through the rooms. It carried the scent of cut grass and faint rain. I felt lighter, but also aware of the weight that would come later, when she came home expecting to step back into the same world. Around noon, Marcus stopped by unannounced, holding 2 coffees. "You okay, man?" he asked. I shrugged. "Getting there." He nodded at the trash bags by the door. "Symbolic? Necessary." He grinned, then his expression softened. "She's gonna regret this." I didn't answer. Regret wasn't my goal. Understanding was. Sometimes people don't realize what they've dismantled until they trip over the rubble. The afternoon passed quietly. I played guitar for the first time in months, just letting my fingers wander. The dog lay beside me, tail flicking. For a moment, life felt normal, like the calm after a storm you survived without realizing it was passing. At 5:30, I heard the car pull into the driveway. I didn't rush to the window. The front door opened slowly. Her footsteps hesitated, then crossed the threshold. I stayed seated at the kitchen table. When she appeared, her face was pale, eyes wide, not from guilt, but confusion. She looked around the half-empty house, then at the bags by the trash bin near the garage door. "What? What is this?" she asked, voice trembling. "Reality," I said quietly. Her lips parted. "You said I could go." "I did," I replied. "And you did. Actions don't freeze time, Nora. They change things." She took a step closer, hands shaking. "It was just one night, I didn't even—" I stopped her gently. "You don't need to explain, it's not about details. It's about decisions. You made one. I made mine." Tears welled, but I saw something else beneath them. A dawning realization. She looked around again, eyes landing on the box I'd left on the counter. She recognized it instantly, the wedding album on top. She pressed her hand to her mouth, a muffled sound escaping. "I didn't think you'd actually—" She started, but couldn't finish. I stood, calm and steady. "You thought I'd be waiting like before, but waiting turns love into habit. I won't be anyone's habit." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked again, loud as thunder in the quiet. Then she whispered, "I think I made a mistake." "I think you found an answer," I said. "Maybe not the one you wanted, but the one you needed." She wiped her cheeks, nodding slowly, as if agreeing with gravity itself. Can I come back? Fix this?" I shook my head. "Not today. Maybe someday we'll talk. But right now, we both need to live with what's real." She looked small then, like someone who'd finally seen the edge of the cliff she'd stepped off. She walked to the trash bin, stared at the bags, then back at me. "You threw it all away." "No," I said. "I put it where it belonged, outside of what's next." She didn't argue. She turned, walked out the door, and stood on the porch for a long moment before driving away. I watched from the window, not with anger, but with the quiet acceptance that comes when a chapter closes itself. That night, I took the dog for a walk. The stars were bright, the kind you only notice when you finally look up. I passed by houses with lights on, families laughing over dinners, kids playing in driveways. I didn't feel envy, just distance. My story had changed, but it wasn't over. When I got home, the trash truck had already passed by and the space by the curb was empty. The bags were gone. I stood there a while, breathing the cool air, thinking about how quickly things can disappear when you stop holding onto them. Inside, the box with our memories sat quietly on the counter. I opened it, looked at one photo of us laughing in the rain, and smiled. Love had existed. It had been good once. That's enough. Tomorrow, I'd start fresh. A clean slate, a quiet house, and the unshakable knowledge that respect, once gone, is never returned in the same shape. And maybe, just maybe, peace begins right there. She didn't come back that night. I half expected a call, a message, something, but my phone stayed silent. That silence didn't ache anymore. It just confirmed what I already knew. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from being done. On Sunday morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the floor and the smell of coffee I'd made myself. The house felt clearer, lighter. The echoes of old routines, her laughter in the hallway, her music while cooking, had faded into quiet memories. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was adjusting. Healing isn't loud. It's just the quiet acceptance that the noise is gone. Around noon, she finally came back. The sound of her car door closing broke the calm. I didn't move right away. When she stepped inside, I saw it instantly. The look on her face wasn't defiance anymore. It was realization. She had seen what the other side looked like and found it empty. Her voice was soft. "Can we talk?" I nodded. She sat across from me at the kitchen table where we'd shared so many breakfasts, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "It wasn't what I thought it would be," she whispered. "He wasn't what I thought either. The whole idea, it just collapsed the moment it started. I felt wrong." I didn't interrupt. I'd already said everything that mattered the day she left. Now, her words were just her own reckoning. "I thought I needed something new," she continued, "but I realized I was chasing a spark that was already here. I just stopped tending it." Her eyes glistened. "I know you don't owe me another chance, but I needed you to know I see it now. Everything I risked." I leaned back, letting her speak. My hands were steady this time. "Nora," I said quietly, "I don't hate you, but I can't unhear what you asked for. You didn't trip. You chose. And I chose too. You can't take a match to trust and then ask it to rebuild itself from smoke." She nodded slowly, tears rolling freely now. "I understand," she said, voice breaking. "I just hope someday you'll remember the good things." "I already do," I said. "That's why I'm not angry. I'm just finished." She stood there a long time, eyes scanning the room like she was memorizing it. Then she picked up the box I'd left for her, the one with our photos and memories, and held it close to her chest. "I'll always love you," she said softly. "I believe you," I answered, "but sometimes love just isn't enough when respect is gone." When the door closed behind her, the quiet returned, but this time it didn't hurt. It felt earned. I stepped outside, watched her car disappear down the street, and let out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The air was cooler now, crisp with fall's edge. Weeks passed. I started running again, something I'd stopped years ago. Marcus and I fixed up the shed, joked about how therapy by hammer might be underrated. Our daughter came home from camp glowing with stories, blissfully unaware of what had happened. I kept it that way. She didn't need to carry our mistakes. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch with the dog and thought about the strange thing that happens when life falls apart. It gives you room to build again, maybe smaller, maybe quieter, but stronger. Nora sent one last message weeks later. It simply said, "I'm sorry. I hope you're happy." I typed back, "I am. I hope you find peace too." And that was it. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it's peace, the kind that unsettles the one who expected your rage. It's dignity held steady when everything else breaks. The house stayed mine. The quiet stayed gentle. And every morning I woke up to sunlight that didn't have to pass through anyone else's shadow.